Really?
ever since my injury.
Yeah.
I was like, it happened February 12th. I was here at Squatch, and I was gonna just do like a sauna session, and that was it. But I ended up playing basketball. I was wearing those barefoot shoes on the pavement, and
Just landed bad.
yeah, it wasn't even like I was doing anything crazy too, man. I just did a couple jerked moves, and it just completely snapped,
Yep.
like audibly snapped. And yeah, so I mean, it happened on the 12th of February, and then I got surgery pretty much 5 weeks later. And I think it was somewhat of a blessing because I could feel that I was grinding. Like, I'm sure you can maybe resonate with this, but I'm working a 9 to 5, and then doing this podcast is just it's a lot, you know? And so, yeah, I was just like grinding, and could feel like I was low on gas and needed to take an extensive break to be able to kind of just let the body rest and the mind rest a little bit, you know? So that's the silver lining. But at the same time, I've been like going back and forth with like, yeah, I don't want to lose the momentum of this, or do I still want to do this, and maybe find some other format, you know? So anyways, yeah, it's been an interesting journey. So, but I'm super pumped to finally get you on, because I know
I forgot it's been 3.
I mean, it's been a while, because you reached out to me. So first of all, when did we first meet? I feel like it was 2021.
It was Jay's meetup, I think.
Oh shit!
I believe. Like whenever we
at
had
the park.
Yeah.
Oh damn!
Which that was forever ago. I was
going to that until he left. He left Austin.
Yeah. No, I think that was 2022.
Okay.
Yeah, because I remember that was when I started part of my road trip, because I went to the Bitcoin conference, and then I remember I drove from Tampa to here straight just to make it back to that weekend event.
What?
Yeah, that was a long drive.
Yeah, that is.
But yeah, that was a fun event.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, okay. I was wondering if there was some other event that we went to as well.
I'm pretty sure it was just that.
Just that?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, cool. Yeah, and then you reached out to me, I think it was like beginning of this year, or maybe the beginning of this year or end of last year. And we weren't able to follow through with it. And then I was like, all right, let's get Ryan on. Let's try to reschedule. And then we rescheduled, and then I tore my Achilles. I was like, dude, I'm sorry.
I'm pretty sure it was literally like the day or 2 days before too.
Yeah.
Because I didn't realize that it had happened until I texted you.
Yeah, dude.
That was crazy timing.
I know. And I was like, there's no way I can fucking do a podcast right after that.
Yeah, no, I definitely understood that.
I was at the ER because it happened at like 6 p.m. And I was at the ER until like 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any friends with me at the time. So I just took a lift from the ER, and my car was here, and I just like hobbled into my car and drove back home. But yeah, glad we're able to finally get this going. I've before I ever moved to Austin, before I ever learned about Bitcoin, I subconsciously and intuitively was just naturally curious with our food system. And I think, you know, I listened to your episode with the Meat Mafia guys, right? And you don't have to get like super into detail on the story of like your family, because I mean you got in detail in that episode, and I know it's pretty heart-wrenching, you know. But yeah, so back in like 2017 maybe, I was working in the restaurant industry, was not the healthiest, not in the healthiest condition. I mean, I was doing okay. I was young. But I felt some drive to like look into our food industry. And so I started reading Food Inc. first, and then Fast Food Nation, those two books. And then I found out, so when I moved here to Austin, really improved my life with regards to having nutrition on lock, fitness, doing sauna, challenging myself with things like this, and other modalities. And when I came, so then I was in Austin. I was still in Austin, and found out about, I forgot what doctor it was, but there was a story on Instagram where he expressed how glyphosate may have been the cause of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And my mother passed when I was 3 from that. And at the time, and that was in 96, no one knew where the fuck it came from.
Mm-hmm.
No one knew how to, cure it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure to this day. I mean, it's a pretty heavy cancer.
Yep.
So I found that out in like 2022. So not that long ago. I just started, I almost, I didn't bawl my eyes out, but when I was on the couch and I saw that story, I was like, oh, okay.
Yep.
So glyphosate might have been the cause. Because my mother, based off of, because I was 3 when she passed, she, from all accounts within my family, she was very healthy and ate her veggies and her fruit, and those veggies and her fruit might have been blasted with glyphosate. Because back then, I don't think grocery marts even had an organic section.
No.
So when I found that out, I was just like, holy shit. And then in retrospect, it was very interesting that I didn't consciously know why I wanted to look into the food industry, but I just felt the call to do that. And so, ever since then, I've been pretty passionate about it. And it's been somewhat of a challenge, dude, because especially, we're here in 2024, but even 2017, people would look at you with the weird tilt with their head if you were specific with the foods that you ate and
mm-hmm.
calling out all this stuff that was in there. They're like, dude, you're such a crazy Nazi with this stuff. And it's more and more you realize the majority of the illnesses in America are due to the repercussions of the shit that we're putting in our food.
Yep.
And so anyways, I just wanted to express that discovery of with my mother, because I know your mother and your brother dealt with major health complications, and they were due to the food industry.
For sure.
Right. People that just don't, maybe they're NPCs or they're just people that are kind of just shut off mentally. I kind of understand why. I saw a story on Instagram yesterday. It was I forgot exactly what he said, but he's like, don't feel bad for maybe feeling mentally unwell for living a human experience that you're not evolved to live in when it comes to technology, when it comes to the food that we're in.
Yeah.
And he was like, I think it would be weird if you didn't feel those complications or those, if you're a fully conscious person, it's pretty difficult to see everything that's happening, and how hijacked our food industry, medical industry, and the state of just many different things currently. So,
that's exactly right. I started this brand because I believe that food, if you fix that, it's a major contributor to all of the diseases. Modern day society is full of toxicity. Plastics, EMF stuff,
mm-hmm.
not getting sunlight, blue light toxicity, all of that. But why I tackle the food source is our whole existence. We've always been connected to the natural world and our food source.
Mm-hmm.
We're the most disconnected we've ever been from, to where most people that grow up in cities, their whole lives will get food from a grocery store, will never ever meet or talk to someone that actually produces the food,
mm-hmm.
will never visit where they make the food. And so once you have those conversations and once you actually go to these places, the farms and ranches, you realize the same thing. Holy shit, I've been so disconnected my whole life. And then you have that food from them and how much better and more nutritious it is than the food in the grocery store. Then to me, and I continue to hear story after story after story from people of the same thing that I had too, was now I'm starting to think about all the other toxicity now that I'm taking control of my food,
Mhm.
what I'm putting in my body. And then, like you mentioned, that healthcare system, every system now, every industry is pretty hijacked
Yeah.
and very centralized in a fiat world.
Mm.
And agriculture and our food system is like that to the extreme.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. And I try not to be overly pessimistic. I try to consistently um, see the good and the bad in modern day society. Um, it's definitely it could be better for sure. We're also in a more peaceful time as well, but it's a different type of peace in a way because, or yeah, I think a lot of what I'm experiencing and other Americans specifically, it's a little bit of like over convenience and complacency. Like it's that challenge and that fortitude that you need to go through is like what makes the human experience. And so, um, yeah, to provide context for the listener too, like fiat, you said fiat, right? So fiat, not the car. It's the currency. So the current U.S. dollar paradigm. You've got other. I mean, uh, I don't know how many national currencies there are right now, but um, I mean, at least 100, I would think. And that uh, fiat currency paradigm has changed in throughout the course of human history. And so before we were on the gold standard and having that form of money or backing of our money has provided more stability in history, though. I mean, we were still gold backed when we were in World War I and World War II, but there was over time I think economies have had more stability with a gold standard, and so when you switch in 1971 with Richard Nixon switching from gold to U.S. dollars backing the global reserve currency, that brought a lot of instability. And we were at the Sapiens Center. Michael, I believe his name is. He wrote the book Fiat Foods, which was co-authored with Saifedean, who wrote the Bitcoin Standard and the Fiat Standard. And so, without not getting too much in the weeds of that, essentially, this transition of fiat currencies has enabled the U.S. Establishment to gain more and more power and centralized power. And we can get into how there's a conglomeration of corporations. I think if you're a stock trader, you know that there's Apple and there's Google and there's Facebook and there's, you have BlackRock that is just I mean, they're the most dominant player in the financial system, but then also with the corporations that run our food system. So, even if you go, I don't know if this is the case with like Whole Foods, but if you go into Whole Foods or Market Basket or any other local grocery store, you see all these different products, but they're all controlled or produced by like 10 companies. And I don't really know the backstory to like how that, I think there's just like, I don't know the names of all those corporations, but I think over time they just like bought out all the smaller brands.
Pretty much.
Right.
I don't know the full backstory, but that's pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that centralization has just caused a lack of, I believe, like farmer, rancher, or just entrepreneurial competition, and would love to get into just how, because you talk about raw milk, you talk about ranchers, you talk about, you know, essentially, or if you want to get into Regenaissance specifically, and then we can kind of get into that topic of like this conglomeration and like the challenges that ranchers are facing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So Regenaissance, when did you start?
I launched May 28th of last year, and it was just a wild journey leading up to that. as you mentioned, listening to the podcast with Meat
Yeah.
Mafia, because why I was mentioning earlier about the realization of disconnection from the food.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 30 now, and then it started essentially when the pandemic started, right around March or April of 2020. I found out that my brother had stage 3 colon cancer, and at the time I worked just in tech at IBM, and so I grew up in, I guess, a middle America city in the Midwest. I don't know, the population was like 110,000, but it was like kind of like suburb feel in a way. So I remember vividly, there's a nearby town that's pretty rural, and they would just have like bring your tractor to high school day. I just remember judging the hell out of all of that. It was funny because it's come full circle, but that's just another example of just the ignorance on my part, but for most of America.
Yeah.
But yeah, going back to 2020, I knew whenever I found out about that if that had ever progressed to stage 4, I would go back to Indiana to be his caretaker. Fast forward to December of that year, it did progress to stage 4. So I took the first 6 months off of 2021 to go back home, and I was his caretaker. On top of that, my mother in 2019 was forced to retire from teaching because of her health. She had shingles, gout, sleep apnea, coronary artery disease, so the most common heart disease. Her kidney and liver were failing, but she was deemed inoperable because of her heart condition. And I believe 14 liters, at minimum 12, I think it was 14 liters from various hospital trips were drained from her lungs. And so she was very bedridden.
What was the cause? Was it just her diet or?
Diet, stress, lack of sleep over time.
What was she eating? Do you know?
The standard American diet.
Oh, okay.
I mean, this is why people, with the healthcare system and all of the Band-Aids, it gets you by for however long, but at one point your body is just going to self-destruct. And for her, it self-destructed so fast. Because she's always been in shit health. She was always very unhealthy, but it changed rapidly in 2019 and then for sure years after. So as I was helping take care of my brother, I was also taking care of my mom. My dad was there, but he had bad back and knees, so he's not the most able-bodied. So I was literally the only able-bodied in the household doing everything. The first 2.5 months of those 6 months, my brother was in the house, but then essentially the last half, he spent in the long-term hospital. He ended up passing 3 days before his 33rd birthday. And I knew through all of that too, I was not going to go back to IBM. I mean, it was a comfy job, but I never really felt fulfilled. And I knew my whole life that I had way more potential, but at that current trajectory, I was never going to hit it. So that's why I remember the first week of going back home that I was not going back to IBM. My manager, like I still had the open communication with him, but he, for the most part, knew I wasn't coming back. So after my brother died and I came back to Austin, I withdrew my 401k because I was just sick of corporate already and just knew I was not going back, not knowing what the hell I was going to do with my life. But then also, secondly, the reason why I quit is just because I was just mentally destroyed, could not function at all. So then fast forward, a lot of that.
Just for context, sorry to interrupt. I can link the video, the podcast episode with the Meat Mafia, because like you get into the first 40 minutes, very detailed progression of your brother.
And I skipped a lot of stuff too. That's the thing. There's still a lot of stuff I couldn't even talk about for how terrible it is.
Oh, you're saying you skipped some stuff during the Meat Mafia?
Oh, yeah. There's a lot I didn't even talk about in that. That's just how horrific. Now looking back, I mean, it was cancer, but more horrific thing is just the opioids and the chemo and the hospital. It's such an awful environment.
Dude, I mean, I never got into opioids when I was a kid. Smoked a lot of weed, drank alcohol at a pretty young age. But I had friends that got into opioids, and I could just see I learned by just being around them, their transformation, like how dark it got.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, just a month ago, got out of surgery, took hydrocodone for 4 days as prescribed. They gave me a shit ton.
Yep.
I could have taken it for another 2 weeks.
Yep.
I stopped after 4, I think it was 4 or 5 days. Because I woke up, man, and one, it's like it clogs your stomach.
That's how my brother ended up in the hospital.
Dude, I couldn't even fucking poop.
So this is exactly what happened to my brother. He was just still losing weight over time, not digesting anything. And then he was still just losing so much weight. So he was given 2 weeks to live. And about the second or third day after that, we were just sitting there. And it was around 10 or 11 a.m. And then he just felt this sharp pain in his abdomen.
Yeah.
And then he thought he was getting stabbed over and over again. And whenever that happened, we learned is because he essentially part of his intestine just blew a hole open.
Oh, bro.
And he had a perforated bowel. And that was from the opioids backed him up so much.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a disaster.
It's no joke, man.
No, not at all. And then the chemo was even worse because that absolutely made it spread faster. That I'm not going to say the general blanket statement that I would never do chemo, but most likely I would never do chemo. And because this is the fucked up part, September of 2020, we're told it goes into remission. December, 2 months later, not only was it back, but it progressed to stage 4. And I wholeheartedly believe it's from all the chemo because it's just like every doctor's appointment we would go to, they couldn't figure out why. Like, they just kept saying it was just a very aggressive form of cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And I wholeheartedly believe it was from all of the chemo and different types of treatment he was doing that just continued to make it spread and make it more aggressive and essentially. Because I don't know how the hell you go from stage 3 being told it's in remission to literally only 2 months later, not only is it back, that's the worst stage.
Yeah, I mean, unless the doctor just made a they fucked up or something. You know,
they all did, so yeah.
Yeah.
That's also why I have Regenaissance is healthcare will fail you. I mean, I've also glossed over. I went through my health journey to where they failed me miserably.
Yeah.
But I mean, the third leading cause of death in America is medical malpractice. And there's a reason for that. I mean, it's very complicated, and I don't want to just completely shit on the healthcare system because there's so many incredible people in it, but they've just been guided the wrong way and weren't taught correctly. It's a giant mess.
Yeah, I have a buddy that has expressed how, so my buddy Ryan, he works as an orthopedic surgical nurse, but he's also, very based within the holistic health realm as well. So it's interesting that he has both feet in the traditional and then like this alternative that can be hopefully the mainstream healthcare, at least like can be more diverse and more intelligent with treating people. And he said that it's most likely a combination of many different things. It's bad incentives, greed, or just ignorance as well. And I'd like to believe that because sometimes if you put your tinfoil hat on, you're like, oh, this is all a plan, to make everybody sick. And like maybe some people in this industry that have a lot of money that are very powerful, they might actually have those incentives and have those intentions, which is fucking terrible. But I think also people just are very blind towards, I can say for myself, like, I thought this was the way, like having green ketchup and mac and cheese and like eating Pop-Tarts and toaster strudels and all these different cereals that are fucking a bag of sugar, and just like all these different artificial ingredients. I was just a kid that believed all of this. It was like, oh, this is great. Like this tastes so good. And then you start to realize like, yeah, it's terrible for your body in the long term. So yeah, Regenaissance. It seems like the main drive and inspiration was from seeing it firsthand within your own family.
Yeah, and then on top of that too was once I was trying to figure out my life, the the last 4 or 5 months of 2021, I pretty much was in my apartment a lot of that time.
Yeah.
I was on Twitter a lot and just learning and unlearning as much as possible. And it was shortly into 2022, I learned about regenerative agriculture, and then that was my light bulb moment of realizing, I need to go at source. And so I began to travel a lot in 2022, and I remember visiting a ranch in Colorado.
Which one?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
Okay.
I was visiting Josh Rayner Gold from Twitter. It was just the farm he was working on at the time. And I remember helping butcher chickens and having that farm fresh pasture raised chicken that day. And then that same week, visiting another ranch in Colorado and having Jordan Hedberg's farm fresh beef with their farm fresh garden produce. Nothing I'd ever had in a grocery store in my life, not even remotely close. The taste is literally night and day difference. And so I was like, okay, this is definitely it. I need to try to help other people have the same realization and push people back to having actual food. Because there's plenty of studies out there. The nutrition breakdown of produce has completely been decimated over 100 years of just conventional agriculture. And then there's studies comparing that versus regenerative agriculture and their produce. And it's night and day difference again. And so once I started learning more about that, then I actually wanted to start working on the farm. So it was fall of 2022. I worked on a farm in Pennsylvania, very rural. The first time I'd ever really experienced rural America. And that was incredible. But at the same time, my health was so bad. So it was...
Was it because you were vegan, you said, for some time?
No.
Were you vegan at all?
Yeah, I was vegan for 2.5 years.
Okay.
This was about a year before that. It was just because it was dating back to whenever I was my brother's caretaker.
Okay.
The stress of that, the lack of sleep. When I came back to Austin, I only weighed 124 pounds.
Wow.
Well, when you think about it, for those 6 months, it's literally one of the most high stress possible environments for just an everyday citizen. I didn't sleep. There's probably 20 different days where I went 24 hours plus without sleep. And then when I did sleep, it wasn't much at all. Because I remember when my brother was in the ICU and then he came down like a floor below before going to long-term care hospital. I was there pretty much the whole first 2 weeks. And it was around midnight. He started becoming delirious. I didn't know he was having, I didn't know, I've never seen that in person. And so for those next 8 hours was the most stressful 8 hours of my life, to where he was just all over the place thinking people were out to get him. He was having panic attacks, thinking that he was dying, but it was just because A, he wasn't sleeping, and B, one of the things with hospitals, it's constant beeping, and it's beeping like crazy, and constantly.
The light too. And
the beeping is the worst part because you can't sleep. Yeah. Because my brother would try to sleep. He would slowly go into haze, and then a beep would happen and the nurse would have to come. But then the nurse is so overworked and understaffed to where the beep's going to be happening for 30 to an hour before the nurse gets there. And it's just rinse, repeat. And so he was just having this awful, delirious episode. My aunt finally came to help. She was an angel through all of that. I went home and I had a very strong sleep pill. I took it and immediately passed out. My body was so stressed from those 8 hours. I woke up an hour and a half later and I couldn't fall back asleep. And so sleep again was just non-existent. And so very awful health. Healthcare failed me for 18 months. They couldn't, not only did they couldn't figure it out, but they misdiagnosed me like crazy. And that's why when I was on the farm, it was terrible. Like I was eating the healthiest of my life, but I was the worst health of my life. Yeah. And it was such a disaster. I ended up having to leave the farm early because I couldn't figure out what was going on. And fortunately, it was like a couple months after that, I found out it was because I had an autoimmune disease, Hashimoto's, which explained everything. And it explained why, the whole farm experience essentially.
Yeah. So before I ask about Hashimoto's, which I believe is an autoimmune disease, right? Yeah, I have a family friend. He had a heart attack, um, and around COVID, during COVID, and the hospital was just giving him Jello and like these sugary sweets, and he was like, he's a pretty healthy, aware individual of like nutrition and all that. He's like, "Are you kidding me? Like, you guys are giving me this right after I had a heart attack?
Yep.
This is what you think is best for someone that just had a heart attack." So like, we are so out of touch from a professional, air quotes, medical, um, standpoint. Like it's pretty crazy. And for me, we have a similar timeline. Like I found out, I found Bitcoin in 2020. I was already kind of looking into the food industry before that, but then looked more into it, and I had a major psychological shock of like many different things about our culture, about America. And so anyways, I just wanted to provide that example of like a family friend that had a heart attack, and he was given these foods that's like are not even close to what you should be eating.
Yeah, there's no healthy food in the hospital at all.
No,
Because whenever I was there for 2.5 months, and it was complete garbage.
I think what's his name, Paul Saladino. He creates these videos where he goes into different university campuses and different hospital facilities and just shows like this is what you're given to eat at these cafeterias. It's like,
Yeah, and what he showed was completely accurate. Like,
Yeah.
I remember seeing a lot of those.
yeah, it's wild. But so Hashimoto's autoimmune disease. Do you know what the cause of that was? It was essentially
Pretty much everything I described was just the high stress, not
stress.
eating well, not sleeping well. I mean, over time, your body's going to start attacking itself.
And how were you able to get rid of the symptoms of that autoimmune?
Oh, I still have it.
You still do?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, so the only reason why I even found out about it was since healthcare continued to fail me, I probably spent 30 grand over 16 months for them to not figure anything out. Absolutely,
Jeez.
completely useless. I will say that. So useless. And so, well, the first thing I did when I was on the farm was I thought I had SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, because I had all the symptoms. And so in my free time, I would just go to YouTube and try to figure it out. I found a guy who went through SIBO himself and was trying to help people.
Mm.
So I worked with him, and it didn't end up working out technically, but I was still able to get a test for SIBO. Fortunately, I didn't have that because that is also serious.
Mm-hmm.
So I still continue to look, and I used Twitter. I found his name was Alejandro AD. He was, I think, 18 at the time. 18-year-old kid in Mexico who had gone through his own gut issues,
Mm-hmm.
and then he healed himself. And I remember we were working through Telegram, and again, this kid is 18, and he has all these guides and visuals, and he would send these long voice messages of super detailed of what's going on with me. And I'm just comparing that to all of the healthcare I just went through.
Yeah.
I was using Austin Gastro, which is technically the best gastro in Austin. It's probably technically better care than the majority of America. And they sucked. They were so awful. They said that I had an overacidic stomach, but the whole time it was the complete opposite. I had a low acid stomach. So they would prescribe me antacids, which just makes it all worse. And the crazy thing through all of this too, Alejandro AD had me take 2 blood tests, a full extensive vitamin and mineral panel, and then a thyroid panel. Not a single doctor recommended me taking either test, and those 2 answered everything. That's whenever I found out I had Hashimoto's. It's when I found out I was really deficient in some vitamins and minerals, which makes a lot of sense because I didn't think about it. Those 6 months, when you're in a high-stress environment and it's fight or flight mode, it depletes your body of pretty much everything.
Yeah.
And so, again, this is why I have Regenaissance is the institutions that you're supposed to trust and rely on no longer will, it will backfire on you way more than you realize. And that's, again, going back to medical malpractice. We spend thousands of dollars on tests and healthcare and pills and all that to only make things most likely worse.
And then you found the truth by an 18-year-old on Twitter.
Exactly. Yeah, it's wild. But then that began. Finally, I had the answers of Hashimoto's, because Hashimoto's essentially my thyroid is not working properly whatsoever, and that's crucial for energy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember what it's like to wake up refreshed. It's been 4 years now since I've woken up with any energy. Like, I literally wake up as if I didn't sleep. I mean, it's getting better, but for the pretty much 2.5, 3 years, I would wake up as if I didn't sleep. And that takes a toll. Because again, like, I genuinely don't remember what it's like to wake up just, let's go.
Yeah, drive.
Yeah. It's brutal, which is also why it made sense with the farm, because essentially the biggest way to heal is not avoid stress, but manage stress, and not just in the sense of like stress of a business, but like physical stress you put on your body. So working on the farm, that's about as much stress as you can possibly put on your body.
Yeah, man.
And so I was wondering why, because it was very hilly. It became so bad that every step I was taking was so painful. By the time I'd get up to the top of the hill, it felt like I'd ran a marathon. And I've ran half marathons before.
Yeah.
I've not always, for the longest time, I was in great shape. And that's why it was just like, what's going on? I'm eating, again, 100% farm fresh food.
Yeah.
But my body was excruciatingly painful, no energy. I've always had very thick hair. My hair began to thin out, brittle skin and nails, poor memory, cloudy brain. Yeah.
So what have you done? So aside from cleaning up your nutrition, and I'm sure getting like sunlight and hydrating, what are you doing to help with this?
The biggest thing has always been stress. That's been the biggest thing that's prevented me from healing, because continuing on with, so I left the farm, and then I had a 2-month period between leaving that farm and my next venture on a bison ranch. Because I also realized, I started sharing all this on Twitter, and I shared my story at the time with my brother and then my mother being unhealthy, and then my plans for Twitter and agriculture, and it went viral overnight. So I realized, okay, I have something here to where now I've got a mission in life, and I have the opportunity to share with, trying to get the goal of reconnecting us back to our food. And my next ranch was in Northwest Montana, starting February 1st of last year. So with learning about, I was deficient in vitamin B1.
Okay.
And 1 week before, I was in Boise, Idaho, and I just started addressing that. And I was taking this, I guess, pretty strong thiamine supplement. I think because my body was just in such disarray, my colon was extremely inflamed, that I had a severe reaction to that, to where over the course of 3 days, I went to the bathroom 80 to 90 times. It was all bloody. The most upper abdominal pain I've ever experienced. Crazy gas noises. I would teeter between fever and cold chill. Could not eat or drink anything. And I remember laying in my bed, because I was in this Airbnb loft by myself, trying to just readjust just to get comfortable. And it was crazy deja vu, because it took me back to when my brother, because he was doing the exact same thing. And I had done a colonoscopy and endoscopy a year before that, and everything was clean. I didn't have any polyps or anything. But still, that was kind of in the back of my head the whole time. So that was even, that was a brutal time, because then it was a Friday night. Things progressively were getting worse. And I realized my only two options were urgent care or ER. Obviously, it is way too serious for urgent care. So I was going to go to the ER the next day. The next morning rolls around. I had to head straight to the bathroom again at like 6:30. And because my body's still in default fight or flight, I'm a very light sleeper. So I sleep with wired headphones to rain sounds.
Yeah.
And I remember I started profusely sweating, and I was thinking, okay, I have to throw up. But then the rain sounds started getting like dimmer and dimmer, and then my eyes were closing, and I realized that I'm passing out here. But it was happening so fast, but in my head I was thinking, I don't know why I'm passing out here is like an organ failing. If I pass out here, I could literally die.
Yeah.
So that minute was the most terrifying minute of my whole life. I hobbled to my bed, and I learned that day that you could talk yourself out of not passing out, because I literally repeated to myself, right, motherfucker, you're not passing out. And then I would just focus on my breath.
Dude.
And I took a couple deep breaths. Somehow that worked to where I vividly remember, like, it was just slowly my eyes were opening back up. I could start hearing again. And then I just drove straight to the ER. It was like 7:30 in the morning. It was sleeting outside and it was still dark. So fortunately, there's no cars because I just ran every red light straight to the ER. And fortunately, since it was that early on a Saturday, got in immediately. They did a bunch of tests and they couldn't find a lot outside of it. I just had a really inflamed colon, and I knew the quickest way to get another colonoscopy and endoscopy was to come back to Austin. So they gave me a bunch of meds, sent me on my way. 5 p.m. that same day rolls around. I could feel myself on the verge of passing out again. Head back to the ER. And this is again why healthcare will fail you, because this is 100% on them. They should know that I was severely dehydrated from all that. So that night they gave me 2 liters of fluid, and that helped a lot. And then I was able to leave. They gave me a $3,000 bill for that, an additional bill. So fortunately, I know we talked before this crowd health, so I only had to pay $500 of that $3,000.
Yeah.
But that is 100% on them. I'm in the worst health condition of my life. I'm supposed to, again, rely on their knowledge and expertise to help me out. They failed me, sent me away, and then I had to go back. And I was pretty nervous, not going to lie about that, because I took my backpack. When I came back to the ER that night, I told them, I'm staying here. I do not want to pass out by myself.
Mm-hmm.
But fortunately, the guy that I was with, he was very helpful and kind. And then the liquids helped. But it's just mind-boggling how they couldn't see how dehydrated I was, and they couldn't give me fluids in the morning when I was first there.
And they charge you $3,000.
Yeah, and they're just like, here, because of our fuck up, here, you pay the bill.
Yeah, it's wild.
It's terrible.
The system's very much broken.
Very, very broken. So I came back to Austin. I drove over the course of 4 days because it was like a 25-hour drive. I did a colonoscopy and endoscopy, and they didn't find cancer or polyps. And they didn't diagnose whether I had like Crohn's or colitis or anything. They said I might have had colitis, but I just had a really inflamed colon. And so I was in the mindset that I was just going to rest and recover in Austin for a couple months before going back out to Montana, because it's going to be May. It's going to be way nicer. And then after that, I had plans to travel the world. I had 3 farms lined up in Italy.
Oh, wow.
And then I was going to go essentially to Western Europe, hit the Middle East a little bit, Africa, Asia, and then come back here. And again, the whole goal was to just share what I was doing and using it as a way to help educate and bridge the gap between the people that consume the food and the people that produce it. And then as I was in Austin recovering, I was on a walk and had this idea for an apparel brand, because I don't remember how it just came to my head about that. And I started doing research, realizing there's no cool looking apparel at all for agriculture outside of the personal brands of a farm or ranch. But they're just doing that just for their personal brand. They don't want to have a huge apparel operation with that. And so I was like, okay, I have something here for sure. Because humans, we're so tribal by nature. And I know you could build a movement out of it with, again, cool looking apparel that feels good. And so that started that journey behind all of that. But through this whole time, again, going back to my mom's health, kept getting worse and worse and worse, because going back to 2022 when I was on the road, I went back home in June because that's when my brother's birthday is. And so I just remember seeing her, and looking back now at the time, I was trying to just emotionally blunt myself, and I just was trying to ignore what was happening with my mom because I was just processing everything with my brother.
Yeah.
But then, last year rolls around, and I realized for sure that this was going to be the last year with my mom. And so I was barely functioning still. Trying to recover with my health after that hospital scare. Trying to build a business because I had never had aspirations to start a business at all. I never thought that was going to be happening. But then I started sharing my idea out with Regenaissance, Because my good friend Case Bradford, I didn't come up with the term Regenaissance at all. As I was again figuring out my life through Twitter, I developed a relationship with a friend, and we were thinking about doing a podcast together called the Regenaissance Podcast.
Oh, cool.
And it wasn't just regenerative agriculture. That was what I wanted to really focus in on, but he wanted to add in just like esoteric health elements. So it'd be like talking to Paul Saladino, it'd be talking to Sean Baker and others. And randomly that thought popped in my head again, and I realized that is the perfect word for this brand that I want to start. And so I talked to him, and then I went into Canva and made a quick mock-up. And then also my friend jokingly was just like, hey, you should do something with Raw's Law. And he was using it obviously for the sexual tone, but with raw milk, because I started learning about raw milk, I was like, yes, I'm using that too. And I trademarked that immediately. So I had these two ideas going on, and then I just started sharing that idea out to literally probably about 100 people that I met through Twitter, folks that had already started businesses, folks that eventually started their own business. And I'm not joking, it was unanimous. Every single person loved the mission and the idea. And so I essentially immediately I messaged the Italian farmers, I messaged the ranch up in Montana that I'm not coming, that I'm just gonna go all in on this. But again, my mom's health was still getting worse and worse. I had my launch date for May 28th. And this idea came to me in, I'd say, March of last year. So it was about 90 days overall to where, from my idea to launch, I mean, it was pretty quick turnaround time for that.
So you trademarked these Raw's Law and Regenaissance last year?
I trademarked Raw's Law March 8th of last year.
Dude, you're crushing it.
And well, because the only reason why, because I shared it to one of my friends, and she jokingly said, if you don't sell, or like, she jokingly said she was going to take it. I was like, I know you're joking, but I'm trademarking this immediately. And I'm glad I did.
Yeah.
Because
people would have probably stole that.
Well, there's almost happening a couple weeks ago to where these guys had Raw's Law hats that they were going to sell. And so I had to stop that. And I'm still watching them like a shark because.
Yeah, for sure. Dude. You gotta be careful with that. But yeah, I mean, so I've known you, I met you, I think before.
Yeah, it was in 2022.
You got this going. And then
I think it was around April of 2020.
Yeah.
Because I remember, like I was telling you beforehand, I was at the Bitcoin conference, and I think it was at like late March or April at the time in 2022.
Okay.
And I remember coming back here, and we met at some type of event.
Yeah. Okay. And then I can't remember when I first saw Regenaissance, but I was like, oh, I think I know who that is that founded it. And yeah, I mean, I've been following you ever since, and your growth from a social media perspective is impressive, and the brand. I mean, I'm not, I'd be honest with you if I thought it sucked. It's really good. It's I like the yellow on the yellow background with the red bison.
Yeah, when I had the idea, that immediately came to me. It was bison with the mustard like
coloring.
It just.
And then I saw yesterday pretty well-known MMA fighters sponsoring Regenaissance, right?
Well, it's the inverse. I'm sponsoring him.
Yeah. That's pretty badass.
Yeah, that's
pretty cool.
That's why. So to continue on to, I had the launch day on May 28th, and I'm still again barely functioning to where I would just force myself. I would go to the same coffee shop every single day, because if I stayed in my apartment at the time, I was not going to be getting any work done. Just because I was still recovering, but my mom's stuff. Now looking back,
you need a separate environment for work and like productivity.
Yeah,
for sure.
No, for sure, and especially in a time of crisis like that, because Mother's Day rolled around. I vividly remember I had just turned into Whole Foods parking lot, and for whatever reason, as soon as I parked, it was like 10 or 11 a.m. And that just triggered everything to where it was like a time capsule was just going into my head to where all these memories of just childhood and growing up and just essentially just going through a picture book of my life with my mom.
Mm.
And then I just started thinking about my future and just where that picture book essentially ends. And that just destroyed me, because then I left Whole Foods immediately and I just drove around and just essentially just let it all out of just the year and a half of just suppressing everything with my mom.
Yeah, man.
And then obviously it got even worse after that, to where those 2 weeks leading up to my launch, I really don't know how I did that. I just forced myself to, just because I had the goal set and I just had to do it. So May 28th it's Memorial Day weekend, and I had the launch date. I started building the social media. I had my actual apparel. And then May 26th, that Friday, my mom texted me out of the blue, which really took me by surprise. Because for the longest time, she'd be the one to call me and text me pretty much every day.
Mm-hmm.
But as her health declined, so did she cognitively. So it always had to be me reaching out for everything. So that's why I was surprised she asked for my website. I obviously now realized why, because I had my launch May 28th, Memorial Day weekend at noon. I had an awesome pre-launch, incredible launch, very successful.
Mm-hmm.
I think I had 110 orders in total.
Wow.
And then again, it's just wild. I can vividly picture this. I was about to turn on to Mopac, one of the main highways in Austin, at 4 p.m. because my friend was just having a cookout for, again, Memorial Day weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had my phone on just like the dashboard, and I could see my aunt calling me, and I knew right away what that meant, because neither of us have called each other. The only time we've ever called each other is probably during my brother's stuff.
Yeah.
And I answered, and she was trying to hold back tears and telling me that my mom passed away. And just like, what the hell? Literally the highest point in my life. Because like I was mentioning, I was able to build this business in 90 days. I had really actually good apparel, to where, I mean, it comments all the time about the shirts, because it's organic cotton, great material. To 4 hours later, the second lowest point in my life after losing my brothers, now losing my mom, and having to message everybody that the orders will be delayed, because instead of packing orders, I'm watching my mom be packed in a casket. And so I went back home, and I would say I was, at the time, way more at peace with her funeral. That was the first time in my life I'd ever been to a funeral to where I felt at peace, because it was a very beautiful ceremony. And for her case too, especially the 2 previous years combined, she was finally not suffering, because she was, I mean, like I mentioned, just the laundry list of health issues, she was suffering a lot on top of after watching her son die. Because the day my brother died was in the hospice. I was on the right side of his bed facing him. My mom was on the left. So she literally watched her son die, and then she knew she was dying too. Because I remember, like looking back, we never talked about it like in a frank manner, but it was more like a roundabout way. And now looking back, she definitely knew. So now I'm just trying to start a business on top of my awful health issues. And then now coming to terms with my mother's stuff. Most of last year was just up and down of just figuring out what to do. Because then September rolled around, I added a podcast. The only reason why I added a podcast is I went to this Bitcoin event where Jeff Booth and Preston Pish and some other awesome Bitcoiners were there.
Was that Miami?
No, it was in Telluride. It was a Bitcoin entrepreneurial event.
Okay.
And I shared everything that pretty much we've been talking about. And Jeff Booth immediately said to do a podcast to be the voice in the space.
Yeah.
I was like, if someone as successful as Jeff Booth saying that, I'm not going to take that lightly.
Yeah.
Because he's genuinely one of the greatest human beings I've ever met.
Yeah.
I didn't even know who he, like I say, I've been a Bitcoiner since 2017, but I've never really been involved with the space. I love what it stands for, but I've never been so obsessed with it that I want to learn about the technical aspects and go to all these meetups and whatnot,
Mhm.
teach their own, but that's just not how I don't know, to me, it just never clicked that way. So I didn't know Jeff Booth was just ultra successful. Like I knew he was successful and he was known in the space, but I didn't know to that extent.
Yeah.
But I think that was cool because then we just had
It's interesting when you don't know that, like you don't have that context, because at least for me, I've met Jeff Booth as well. So I got into Bitcoin in 2020, and Jeff Booth has been in the Bitcoin space for some time. He's very unique perspective, and he wrote a book called I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's an understanding of economics, the acceleration of the production of technology, and how Bitcoin will be essentially the source, or the source of our currency to be assimilated with this exponential acceleration of technology. I can't remember the name of his book, but anyways, I was in Miami in 2021, I think, and I was on a scooter in a pretty sketchy place, and I almost literally rode into them, Preston and Jeff.
Mhm.
It was late at night, and I almost fucking drove into them, and I just like stopped, and I was like, Preston Pish, Jeff Booth, and they're like, yup, and I just like introduced myself, and they left, but I saw Jeff the next day and at the conference, and very awesome dude. Very awesome dude. So that's pretty cool. You were able to, and you can think about it like this too. Like, you know, Jeff, alongside many others, is like a pioneer for this new age of Bitcoin. And it's impressive, and it takes a lot of courage, because we're at a point where the US dollar is obviously completely controlled by the Federal Reserve, aka the establishment. And so Bitcoin is something that is a threat to the establishment. And we just found out this week, I mean, I don't know if you saw the news, but like the FBI is coming after Bitcoin privacy, which is not good. It's a sad day for Bitcoin privacy in America, at least. So yeah, Jeff Booth is like a pioneer. So for him to be able to come up to you and, you know, be able to share, like, yo, start a podcast. That's pretty dope. That's pretty dope.
Because I also forgot to I glossed over this part. At that time too, with Regenaissance, the focal point was definitely agriculture and the food system, but I was still talking about grounding and sunlight and EMFs, and they're just like, you've got your niche, focus on agriculture.
Yeah.
Especially with my strengths of just talking to people. And I'm glad they for sure mentioned that, because there's agriculture podcasts, but the hosts are usually have been born or they work in agriculture. I come at the perspective of just like a normie, essentially. And I think that works really well with the podcast.
Absolutely. And with the perspective of the medical situations you've been facing. I mean, people can sympathize or empathize with that, because, I mean, millions of Americans are dealing with this now. And it's not just like a small percentage of people. It's like, it's a large percentage. So
yeah. But then that added more stress to my life, because I'm still trying to figure out the apparel and scale that. I was doing everything organically. And then on top of my health, and then I add a podcast to where I'm doing everything on my own. I'm not editing, but everything else I'm doing on my own. And so that was just adding way more stress to my life, and my health was continuing to get worse still. And so I was just trying to figure out what to do. And I made the executive decision that mid-December, I was going to close my apparel shop, because I couldn't separate myself from anything. And especially my house that I live at, because I don't have furniture or anything. I just have apparel everywhere.
I think I've seen some pictures.
Literally, my whole living room is just apparel. I don't have a single chair or anything. But so I closed my apparel shop, and I actually went to El Salvador.
When?
In late December.
Okay.
To just recover and try to relax. And then I was gonna initially spend all of January in El Salvador, and still do the podcast. But obviously, I wouldn't be able to fulfill all the orders and everything, to use a way to help with my stress. I cut the El Salvador trip short. It's a great spot, but the infrastructure and internet were not
Where in El Salvador?
I was on just beach towns.
Okay. Yeah,
So, I mean, if I had stayed in San Salvador, I would have been able to, but
yeah.
I wanted the beach for my healing, for the literal healing properties of grounding in the ocean. But I came back to Austin, and I'm glad I made that decision to close the shop, because then another thing that was distressing is using social media and how much these social medias change, and you have to figure out the algorithms. And I was just really stressing with that. And I started working with a Twitter agency, and that coincided with coming back. And so I'm so glad I did that, because then that took so much stress off, and it was a really good reset, because I reopened in February, and essentially since then has been incredible, to where I was able to really grow the brand quite fast, to where now it's almost May. I continued to have the best sales months month after month, and it was all organic too, which for apparel, apparel's hard. Apparel industry is very, very hard.
Especially if you're doing it US made too, right?
Yeah, from everything but my hats right now are US made. Apparel industry is just very cutthroat, especially whenever you're majority of folks don't realize polyester and synthetic fibers, because that's just so cheap. So people can just take that route to where they can sell $45 shirt and make $40 profit.
Yeah.
If probably more than that. So yeah, that helped a lot with the stress for sure. And then things starting to get crazier and crazier, to where you mentioned like MMA. I was starting to really get a lot of traction on Instagram, just posting a lot of journalism, but essentially a lot of stuff with raw milk, and trying to educate on that. And some of the posts got really good engagement, to where it made its way to a former MMA fighter, Travis Brown, who's now a rancher. Him and his wife, Ronda Rousey, have a ranch, a regenerative ranch in Oregon called Browsey Acres. And I saw he liked one of my posts. I immediately DM'd him and was just kind of shot my shot. Not only did he read it, and he immediately followed my account back. Instead of me sending him a shirt, he immediately bought a shirt, and I was like, holy smokes.
That's awesome.
And then I asked him if he wanted to come on a podcast, and he agreed, and then we had a conversation on that. Not long after that, another post made its way to Miesha Tate, who's one of the probably most well-known female fighters in MMA history.
Okay.
She followed my account, and I'm talking to her too, and she's all in, because she's retired now, but she's getting into homesteading. And so I send her a shirt, and then St. Patrick's Day rolls around, and I see she shared it on her story. It's like, okay, that's freaking awesome.
Yeah.
Not long after that, she made an actual post wearing my shirt and tagging my brand to 1.5 million followers. So I'm just like, okay, things are really picking up. And around that time still, I was talking to a friend, and he was talking about how he thought about doing a sponsorship with Bryce Mitchell like a year ago. And he just said he emailed his manager. I was like, that's pretty straightforward. He didn't end up doing it, but I remember going to Bryce Mitchell's Instagram page. His management handle is on there. And when you click into that, you can just essentially apply to be a sponsor for him.
Yeah.
So I just went and did that. I heard back pretty much that day. Bryce loved my idea, because I figured he would, which is why I did this, because I've been following Bryce Mitchell.
I saw him chug like 8 raw eggs.
That video, he's awesome.
It's definitely right on brand.
He is a very country boy. He's from Arkansas, but he's a farmer himself. And so I knew I had, for a while, my main focus was agriculture and the farmers, which I'm still doing that a lot. But I've realized my strength is relating to the 99% of the population that is the food consumers, and try to bring them to agriculture. And so starting with the athlete industry. So I applied, he immediately responded, and I haven't even really started the sponsorship technically yet. But
it's now, on his Instagram page. So.
That is cool, yeah. But he's a really big MMA fighter.
Yeah.
May 8th, so next week or 2 weeks from now, I'm going to his farm, filming a lot of stuff, having him on my podcast.
Wow.
That
is dope.
Later in May, he's coming here. I'm hosting a meet and greet, and then we'll be doing sponsored posts. But just there's more and more stuff like that continues to happen to where, again, I launched May 28th of last year.
I
So
know,
it hasn't even
man.
been a year. And with the tagline Raw is Law, seeing people on Twitter everywhere use the slogan.
Dude, yeah.
And that's again why I want to use the athlete space, because I think that slogan can work really well for raw milk education. Because now it's to where I get messages pretty much every single day now about when they started adding raw milk, or once they started talking to farmers, or once they started eating farm fresh food, and just the health benefits. But not just that. Why I'm tackling the food, I truly believe it's the root cause, because we are so disconnected from the natural world.
Mm-hmm.
And then you start thinking about all of the other industries and toxicities in your environment. And so it just really gets the wheel spinning in your head.
Yeah. So, if you don't mind me asking, because I mean, I drink raw milk almost every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done a little bit of research on the health benefits, but a lot of the changes that I've made over the course of the past 2 years have been like a trust in the source of where I'm getting that information, and just testing, and then being like, oh yeah, I definitely feel way better. But if you could break down, like, what is the difference? What are the health benefits to drinking raw milk versus pasteurized milk? Because I know raw milk is essentially, I mean, it's
not tampered with.
It's not tampered with. It's not boiled and heated up, right? And the reasoning behind that in the past was to, prevent illnesses from like bacteria infections or whatever.
So
but that was like once in a blue moon that could ever happen.
So
So I'm wrong on that.
a little. I mean, you're partially right.
Okay.
So the thing that pisses me off the most is it should just be called milk, and then called pasteurized milk.
Yeah.
Because up until the 1800s, humans were just drinking milk and its raw, natural form.
Yeah.
I mean, it's at least 10,000 years ago. Evidence suggests way longer than that we've been consuming raw milk. And it wasn't until the 1800s, the Industrial Revolution, essentially. So the War of 1812 happened, and once that ended, our supply of whiskey essentially was cut off from Britain, and so a bunch of whiskey distilleries propped up. And take New York City, for example. I think they had anywhere from 4,000 to 7,000 whiskey distilleries prop up. And a lot were starting to close down. And a lot of these owners were trying to find ways to bring in more revenue.
When was the Prohibition era again? Do you know for alcohol? Do you know the exact date?
1900s.
1900s? Okay.
Yeah, like the 20s, 30s.
Okay.
So to add more profits, they were just trying to supply milk and try to supply as much milk as possible. So they attached these cows behind these distilleries in these small confinement areas, no grass, so that's their natural diet, no sunlight, which they need. And essentially, they're just in these very stressful environments. A lot of them were already very, very ill because, again, these cities in the Industrial Revolution were horrific. When you think about when there weren't cars, there were horses everywhere, and there's horse shit everywhere that brought in flies and diseases and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Very unsanitary conditions. And then you have these cows being fed these nasty whiskey distillery grains left over just to fatten them up as quickly as possible to up the production of milk, which technically worked. But then there's the consequence of that to where they're selling disgusting milk, which was called swill milk. They had this blue pus tendency to it.
Ugh, dude.
And then so they would sell that to the city, and the infant mortality rate skyrocketed. And at the time, they just said, oh, it's raw milk that's killing people. And it makes sense at the time, because that's why we've always been told raw milk will kill us. We think black and white. There's no nuance. None of this is talked about at all. It's so infuriating that part is not talked about. Of course, when you sell disgusting blue pus-filled milk, that's going to make people sick.
Blue? How the fuck did it turn blue?
Just, that's a good question.
That's crazy.
And so they were like, okay, this is killing them. And so that's why pasteurization happened in the first place.
Yeah.
But that's never talked about. So pasteurization, that boils the milk. And why they say that's to kill the bacteria and enzymes that make us sick. again, that doesn't paint the full picture. There's a bunch of beneficial bacteria and enzymes in the milk that's incredible for our immune system that's not talked about. But not only that, it denatures a lot of vitamins and minerals. If you go into a grocery store and you see vitamin D milk, there's a reason, because pasteurization kills vitamin D in its natural form.
Mm-hmm.
Lactose intolerance, that's a huge thing. Talking about how 70% of the world is lactose intolerant. A lot of people still can't digest A1 raw milk, but majority of folks can have A2. They can drink sheep and goat milk.
What are those? Like, what is that?
It's the
A1
casein
and A2?
protein. Like A2 cows are the cows that we've always had for, I haven't looked in the history of why A1 came to be, but for the longest time, our bodies have just been aligned with A2 protein for cows. So like Jersey cows.
Okay.
But for lactose intolerance, it's specifically, pasteurization kills the enzyme lactase, and that gives humans the ability to digest lactose. So again, I've made a post about this a couple times. I've gone to the grocery store and found lactose-free butter. If you look at step 2, they re-add in the enzyme lactase. So it's just like right there. It's just showing it into our face that, again, that's why lactose intolerance is really a thing. Because a lot of people that are quote-unquote lactose intolerant will drink raw milk. It's fine.
Oh, so it's the pasteurized milk is essentially burning off the lactase, and because of that, that has brought up the human condition of lactose intolerance.
Correct.
And so they're now incorporating an enzyme
the one that's already natural and the one that's already in its natural state.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Because I don't know what the statistic is for lactose intolerance and like when that progression of like more cases of that have occurred in history, but it's more than it's ever been.
Oh, by far.
By far. Okay.
Well, because then you also think about now with pasteurization, now the care and the quality of the animals, it doesn't matter because they're just going to, especially now that big dairy controls a lot of the industry, they feed them nasty grains, pumped with antibiotics.
Yeah.
All for it to just be pasteurized because they can just get away with that.
Yeah.
And so you're feeding them nasty, nasty milk. And that's why you have all kinds of gut issues. That's why you have asthma, all these skin conditions that go away once you start having raw dairy.
And raw milk tastes better.
That's because it takes away the fat. Like you have the full fat in all of that. It's just, it's so infuriating how much we've been lied to on that, to where now it's so political. You're seeing them as just this quack conspiracy theorists for pointing out history. Because if you look in the 1800s, I mean, in France and so many other places around the world used raw milk. It was called the real milk cure, but we would use raw milk to cure all kinds of ailments, immunity issues, and especially with children too.
This is so the whole conspiracy theorist thing, like, not to get too far into that, but this is how I think there's been reports of how like some of the U.S. intelligence agencies have been able to utilize that classification as something that's very negative. And conspiracy theorists in the past were like, you weren't some kook, right? Like you weren't like totally off your off your rocker, but like nowadays it's used as a very, very negative, insane connotation, and it's applied to people, some that are actually providing truthful, factual information.
Yeah.
And you can either say that that's a short-term memory loss of the intelligence agencies, which I doubt, or they are actually trying to manufacture whatever. I don't know the differences between disinformation and misinformation, but that's where sometimes I put my tinfoil hat on. I'm like, there does seem to be this suppression of information, and we're being told the opposite of what, like, we're someone, I don't know if you retweeted it, but Marty had a podcast for Rabbit Hole.
Sorry, I have to use the restroom so badly.
Me too.
All right, cool.
We can go back to that.
I know exactly what we're going to talk about. I thought I was going to be able to make it, but I realized I was not going to be able to focus.
Yeah, no, that's a good thing that you, okay, so, to continue off of where we were tinfoil hats, conspiracy. Marty Bent was talking to Odell on Rabbit Hole Recap, and they were just talking about so Rabbit Hole Recap is like essentially recapping recent news in the Bitcoin industry, some developments of the Bitcoin protocol and more technical aspects, and then also news about like the FBI's message the other day. But then they were all also talking about just how like Marty made some joke about I forgot what it was. He was just talking about the vaccine and stuff like that, and then meat and how if you ask ChatGPT right now what's healthier, meat or I think Fruit Loops, ChatGPT will say Fruit Loops because there's like
the tough study probably.
Yeah, some type of fat, saturated fat or something along those lines for red meat. And it's like, that's insane that we're at that point where ChatGPT, and that's the scary aspect right now because like Gemini, Google's ChatGPT or AI protocol is essentially not showing any white human beings. I don't know if you saw that, which is fucking insane as well. It's just like promoting.
Well, that doesn't surprise me because humans still created it all.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not surprising. It's just insane.
It is insane.
It's promoting racism in the name of in the name of trying to get rid of racism. So that's what like DEI is and all that stuff. And I know we're going off topic there, but like, you know, it's all kind of connected in a way. Like people like there's certain parts of the establishment that are like trying to subvert things through ideologies as well as the food system, as well as academics through the, you know, that's connected the ideology and academics and censoring the internet.
My account gets censored all the time. So
the Kansas City cattle company just got banned on Twitter like the other day.
It's not surprising.
And they were speaking some bass, like they were pumping me up every post, and I was like, oh, that's probably why he got banned. Which is interesting because it's, you know, Elon, you know, it's I haven't seen too much of that since Elon bought Twitter, and you know, he's a free speech absolutist. But yeah, they got banned, and they're on Nostr now. But yeah,
I mean, so going back to the raw milk stuff, I mean, I make posts about this all the time on Instagram because, again, going back to just the quack stuff, the institutions did a great job of demonizing raw milk and making it look like if you're a proponent of raw milk, you're a proponent of getting people sick and dying. But this is why I try to talk from a logical standpoint for two things. When you think about a farmer, well, there's a huge misconception of people that are in farming and ranching in it for money. That's the most ignorant statement people ever can make, and I see that a lot, that they're not for money. It just makes me laugh, especially if you've ever worked in agriculture.
You're not really making much money.
No, not at all. And so why would a farmer risk everything to start a raw dairy farm to sell it to people if they knew it was going to make you sick? Why would they do that? Why would they risk their whole operation, potentially go to jail, lose all their money, all that stress, just to get people sick? That just does not make any sense at all. And you cannot, there's really not a counter argument to that. And then number two, there's really not a counter argument to this either. If 3% of Americans drink raw milk every year, which is millions and millions of Americans, how come we aren't seeing millions and millions of hospital visits and deaths from that? You don't. You see people get sick, that's true. But you take the risk of eating any food that gets sick.
Right.
Recently, there's an article out that organic basil from Trader Joe's caused food poisoning.
Right.
That happens. Yep. Pasteurized dairy, the largest salmonella case in our history, happened in 85 or 86 that was caused from pasteurized dairy. And so again, we think in such black and white terms that when you actually start getting into nuance, it makes a lot of sense. And that's why I have my brand. That's why I'm so educational focused. And that's why I have like the Raw is Law slogan, is to try to catch on, but then have you actually learn about what the hell has happened to our food system, what the hell has happened with raw milk. Because like you were saying, there is a lot of suppression. If you you search articles for raw milk, there'll be a few, but whenever there's a quote unquote salmonella or E. coli outbreak, there will be 30, 40 articles. So for example, Raw Farm had an E. coli outbreak that didn't end up actually happening. But they already had 40, 50 articles out and telling people to stop buying their stuff and everything needs to be recalled. So that damage is already done. And then the last thing, like I was saying on Instagram, I get suppressed a lot. There'll be posts that I've made. For example, I just posted on one about West Virginia legalizing raw milk. Got really good engagement, and I tried to boost the posts. Immediately rejected, appealed, rejected. And that consistently happens time and time again. And I remember when I worked on the farm, I'd post stuff on raw milk and it'd get taken down immediately.
Yeah. X, formerly Twitter, seems to be incentivizing content creation revenue. So from your ads. I don't know the whole scope of it, but I mean, you could try doing that because I know Instagram.
I hate Twitter.
You don't like it? You don't think he's made it somewhat more?
He was for a while, but the last month or two, it's gotten so bad to where I've transitioned to Instagram pretty much.
Okay.
Because even with the suppression, I'm still getting to the people I want to be getting to, and they're finding my content. But Twitter, that's not happening at all.
Yeah, I mean, all the major platforms are. I'm always in the back of my mind pretty sketched out with like what I put on. Like I still speak my mind. I still put things out there. But I'm like almost anticipating like I'm going to be banned or something, or hasn't happened yet. I also haven't been putting up much content lately, but they still, I wonder if they still have like parts of our intelligence agency monitoring it and saying like, don't put this up and stuff like that, which is just kind of wild.
Yeah, for sure.
But Instagram is like definitely a great place for growth. I know a lot of Bitcoiners don't like Instagram. They like, they're full on Noster. But if you're trying to make a living, like even Marty Bent, like he's fully on X, right? And YouTube, and because it's just how you make revenue off of media. I mean, if you have a media company, and I don't even like to say I'm a media company, but even for yourself, like in a way you kind of are.
No, I'm
like,
definitely a media company.
All of how you make money, and it's the transfer of information through your content. And media has a bad connotation nowadays. So like, I don't know.
That's why I want to change it.
Content creation, solopreneur, whatever you want to call it.
Well, I'm taking the journalistic approach because journalism is just garbage.
Right. Yeah.
And that's why, so the rest of this year I'll be on the road doing exactly that. A lot of in-person podcasting, but essentially journalism. Because so I learned about this case in Oregon a couple months ago, and it made me really want to do this because it's making me realize just how much our agriculture is being attacked that people aren't aware of. So there's these two small dairies in Oregon. I think one of them only has one cow, and the Department of Ag in Oregon is trying to enforce if you have at least one cow, you are now considered a CAFO, which is a concentrated animal factory operation. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And that's essentially just like the factory farming model. And so what they're saying is if you have one cow, your operation is equating to a dairy that has 2,000 cows, which means the permits and all of the forms and new payments, like they're essentially trying to just take them out.
We are living in an age of the abundance and degradation of free market competition due to bureaucratic control.
So I'm trying to expose all of that.
It's fucking insane.
Because that's the only way anything's going to change. Literally the only way our food system will change is how we use our money. That's the only way it's ever going to change.
Yeah.
Because it's so centralized and controlled. The only way to take that away is take away their profits and put that into the hands of the small producers in your local economy, essentially. And the only way that's ever going to change is if people are aware of that.
Yeah.
Because again, going back to, you don't think about whenever you're so used to just getting your food in the grocery store, you're expecting to walk in, everything's stocked, you have no idea where it came from.
Mm-hmm.
Food is not in season, but it's still there. You're not going to be thinking about this stuff. And so that's why I hope that they find my account and then it gets the snowball rolling to what's happened.
Yeah. And it's such a complicated situation because, the bigger you grow, you never know. Like one platform might just oust you and try to just silence you. And the more effective thing is like, okay, we're not going to ban you. We're just going to shadow ban you as much as we possibly can. So having more people that are doing, so you've got the meat mafia, you've got a lot of different people that are doing similar within regenerative agriculture and the food industry, which is great because you want that decentralized, independent content creators to do this, so that it's just so difficult. Like they literally would have to censor everything.
I was gonna say the good thing is they can censor me, but the train's not stopping. That's what I've also realized too with Instagram. But talking to farmers, talking to Raw Farm Mark McAfee, I had him on my podcast, and him talking about just the insane growth the last 3 years and the insane demand for raw milk because people are waking up to everything.
Mm-hmm.
Why Instagram's so big, why I'm switching to Instagram too, is it's really big community for homesteading and agriculture. And it makes sense because you're sharing videos and you're sharing your farm experiences. But so many people are waking up to where they could censor me, but it's not going to work because I will just find a way. I'll find my way, which is also why I'm traveling, is so people, I can meet people. Because I'm going to have a very extensive website for education as well.
That's good that you're creating a website. And one strategy that I've heard is to make sure you build an email list, because if they literally block you everywhere, you still have that like essentially like a CSV file of just all of those emails, right? And then you can just plug it into a new whether it's Substack or some type of email CRM or whatever.
That's pretty much what I use Twitter for now extensively, is to just funnel to newsletter.
Yeah,
that's like good. The whole focal. Like any post, I want it to go to the newsletter.
Yeah, it's always good to have that backup plan because you never know. I mean, during COVID, it was much more of a risk, I think, because man, censorship was ramping up, especially if you spoke about the virus but even just other things. And I mean, that hasn't totally gone away, but it's not as bad as it was. So that's good that you're doing that, because I've even thought about it too. I haven't really, I started to, I've like done two newsletters or 2 posts for my newsletter. And I've been kind of taking a break ever since my injury. Because I was pushing myself so hard. But it's in the back of my mind. It's just to make sure. So we were talking about raw milk. I saw a post. It was a recent post on your Instagram about this LA restaurant owner that used to be vegan.
Yeah.
Can you get more into that story, that backstory a little bit? Yeah,
I forgot how long ago she started, but it was a very large vegan restaurant in LA. The woman started learning about regenerative agriculture, I believe, 7 years ago.
Yeah, her name's Molly Englehart, I think. Started Sage Vegan Bistro. And the video that's on Instagram talks about how she started to learn about regenerative agriculture. Because here's the thing, is that many people, unfortunately, they get inaccurate information about, and that inaccurate information can be somewhat propaganda.
Yeah, because that's why I went vegan in the first place. I wouldn't, because again, it goes back to black and white, and there's no nuance. For most people that go vegan, they think about factory farming, and that's it. That's the only farming.
Or climate change right now.
Those two. But in terms of animal welfare, they only talk about CAFOs, and that's what I did too, because I didn't watch Dominion. I've never watched any of the documentaries. I didn't talk to any vegans. I had no vegan friends. The only reason why I went vegan was thinking about and learning about factory farming and how horrific that was. When I switched back to eating meat and started learning about regenerative agriculture, and then actually talking to the farmers and seeing it firsthand, realizing that there's a way different way for animal welfare, because what a lot of farmers will say, it's just harmonious with nature, and that's true. Regenerative agriculture is most aligned with how nature operates, and that also involves with the quality and care of the animals. These folks will be out there in 2-3 a.m. It's snowing or raining. They'll be taking care of them. If there's a sick animal in the barn, they'll sleep right next to them to make sure they're okay. Vegans don't ever talk about that. All they talk about is factory farming, which is true. That's one thing I will always agree with them on. But they miss the whole picture. And then that's what happened, I believe, with this woman for the vegan butcher or the vegan restaurant,
Mm-hmm.
because then she started learning about regenerative agriculture and the animal welfare through that, but then also how amazing it is for the environment and restoring our land that we've degraded so long. And so she slowly, I guess as she was just learning, decided that she wanted to change from a vegan only restaurant to the first regenerative restaurant in LA. And she didn't talk about it, but I 100% believe that part of that was finances too, because vegan restaurants just aren't economically feasible, especially in a city like LA.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many vegan restaurants that even if the food's good, the economics are so bad, they still close down. But for her, she saw that, and now she's supporting regenerative farms and ranches, and freaking awesome seeing her, because that takes huge guts. Because if you go to those comments of her actual post, there's a lot of people in support. Like you'll see Paul Saladino, I saw a comment, and others, which is awesome. That's freaking great. But then you see the vegans, and they're just
going crazy.
Yeah, which I mean I can get, because that is, if I was a vegan at the time, I would have been very angry. But that's why it's so huge she's doing that, and she's doing it in a way, she did it the right way too. She's not attacking veganism. She's going about talking about the lay of the land. Like pretty much what I've done, and what me leaning to Regenaissance is how she's talked about that, and it's freaking awesome.
Yeah, to reach the minds and the hearts of vegans by just ridiculing it nonstop is not going to really help. They're just going to get angry. So if you talk about, okay, here's the reasons why I was vegan: factory farming, climate change, air quotes. And that's a whole separate conversation. But you're doing this because of the how this started. Fast Food Nation kind of talks about the founders of McDonald's and the founders of then the competition between Wendy's and Burger King and all that. They used to use beef tallow for frying. It was like actually still healthy food that you could eat.
Yep.
And it became a massive chain or a corporation, right? And I think in Fast Food Nation, they even talk about how the executives of some of these fast food companies would use some type of satellite technology that was previously used in wartime to be able to find the most convenient places for them to set up restaurants. And,
that's awesome.
And so they've just massively grown. And so in order to do that, there was a gradual process of cutting costs, of which then, unfortunately brought about these pretty unsafe, unethical environments for these animals. And then that makes meat look terrible, right? So meat's just unhealthy because you're having these burgers that are maybe filled with tons of other things like hormones and antibiotics, but then you're putting like these seed oils in them, or tons of condiments. And then you're also eating on the side like these smoothies and like all these different gross stuff, right? And so I can see where people think red meat is bad because of how the growth of fast food nation has really stigmatized it, but also just there's other additives and things in it that make it unhealthy. And so
we're also just lied about it. We're told it causes cancer. We're told that saturated fat's bad. We're told that it clogs our arteries. We're told that red meat causes heart disease. So when you're shoved that down your throat constantly, of course, I mean, I didn't, even whenever I wasn't vegan, like before I was vegan, and I didn't eat a lot of red meat. I ate a lot of chicken breast. I ate a lot of, if you look at the graph of how much we used to eat beef versus chicken, and how pretty much it's completely opposite now, is insane.
Yeah.
It's wild.
I used to mainly eat chicken, and I barely eat chicken now. It's mostly red meat. I get it from K&C Cattle here in Austin. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see, like, that's a brave thing for that woman to do, to be able to be a vegan, to probably have a lot of family or maybe friends or acquaintances within your region of where you're living physically, but also digitally, that are all like pro-vegan. And then you have the courage to make the switch, to face the lashings, right? And to keep going forward with what you feel is best for your health.
The last thing I want to add to that too is the fact that not only did she switch from not being a vegan only restaurant to adding in meats, she's making it seed oil free. But right now, with the economics of food, regenerative in a restaurant is going to be more expensive than a non-regenerative
For sure.
restaurant. And so she's also taking the financial risks of that too. I mean, she's pioneering that movement essentially.
Yeah.
And that's why she deserves so much praise.
Yeah, for sure.
Because that's another thing with like seed oils. You can go to steakhouse, they're going to be using seed oils.
Yeah, I've gone to a few. Well, my father came here to visit one time. We went to like 3 different steakhouses. It was great. Just like high quality steakhouses. But I did not ask at the time, do you guys use seed oils and this and that? And though the steak tasted great, I don't know for sure. I didn't confirm that. But the interesting aspect is, so Ziki being more of like a chain food truck here, like they don't use seed oils, and that's trending in the public eye. Seed oils are becoming a trend, the theme, and you've got seed oil companies like trying to put out information like, oh, it's not bad. So there's a change of
I mean, it's the same thing with just dairy. They're just being attacked, so they're gonna attack because it takes away their profits.
Yeah, so it's a good change to see, at least here in Austin. I definitely, it's pretty widely known, right? And then on the internet, it's present. You've got more and more people talking about it. So the more the public demands it, the more the market will change. But it's not easy, especially after a paradigm of doing this for decades, and you've got really wealthy corporations or companies that they will fight against that, which is pretty scary, you know. Like, so people like yourself, me Mafia guys, you know, I don't know if I ever asked Harry. I might have, because I had him on the podcast. How are you anticipating them lashing back at you?
I just go with the truth. Before 1865, seed oils didn't exist. We used animal fats for everything.
Right.
You look at the charts. Going back to saturated fat and red meat causing heart disease, how come if you look at the chart of animal fat consumption just continues to decline, seed oils just continually to increase to where now 32% of our calorie consumptions from seed oils. Heart disease continues to rise. All of these other chronic diseases continue to rise. If saturated fat was the culprit, why the hell does it continue to get worse? Mm-hmm. Not only that, and then that's why Paul Saladino, he's very, he's definitely orthorexic, but he's way too like taking 10 coconuts to an airport just to get water. He's way too high strain and all that, but he brings a lot of truth, and he talks about just seed oils and the omega-3/6 ratios and how out of whack that causes internally. And then you just look at Americans' body compositions.
Yeah, for sure.
Bro, so bad. And then also just at the time, because this is why I, again, go to education. This has been happening well before our parents lived. This has been happening for so long.
Yeah.
I mean, you think of the early 1900s, they started bringing in Crisco and shortening, and then that led into just talking vegetable oil and saying that it's healthy because it's coming from a vegetable.
Vegetables, yeah.
And so it's just been a very slow burner, and then it definitely picked up in our parents' generation and definitely in the 90s, and now where we're at now, to where by 2030, 50% of America is going to be obese. Right now, 75% of America is overweight, obese, severely obese. Children between ages 2 and 19, it's like 10% have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, not even caused by alcohol. Kids are now are born with diabetes, like all these crazy health conditions, all because of just the slow burner of just making these changes and being lied to about so many different things, switching from high fat to low fat dairy and just low fat everything. It's just a giant mess. And now you look at, again, the institutions we're supposed to trust. The USDA has a dietary guideline from 2020 to 2025, and they have this infographic of nutrient density and essentially non-nutrient dense. The nutrient dense, they have vegetable oil, and the non-nutrient dense, they have butter. And so again, you have the very institutions you're supposed to trust, and they're telling us the complete opposite of what we're supposed to be doing. And so no wonder that we're all over the place. And then you have an article at every single other freaking day saying this meat will be bad for you, that meat's bad for you, this is bad for your environment. And so it's just like, of course, we're all confused. And so I'm getting to the truth and sharing that. Not only that, I'm going to the history of everything, because that's just what's so funny with raw milk. It's so well documented. You just need to actually do some research. And like going back to the pasteurization, when you look at that time, there's articles from New York Times in like 1858 and 1878 speaking out against that stuff. So even just things like that, there's the truth already is out there. You just have to search for it. And that's why I'm so educational focused, is because there's going to be so much pushback. There already is a lot of pushback from very powerful institutions. And I've got the truth. So you can't, I mean, it's very emotionally focused, but that's also why I share my story too. That's why I'm also very story oriented and sharing my family's case, because although for my age, I'm 30 and I've lost 2/3 of my family in 3 years, especially with cancer, but it's only becoming more and more common. So, yeah, just can't, now that I've seen, it's funny with like the Andrew Tate Matrix stuff, but it's kind of true. Now that I've just had the bird's eye view of everything, it's just, I can't unsee it. And so
for sure,
the only way that's why I have it, is just, that's my way of the truth and helping.
I think that's a big reason why I started this podcast, was because I was kind of going crazy. And it's a big reason why I moved to Austin, because I was living, it was during 2020, and I feel like I just kind of discovered a lot of that high level matrix aspect of like finding the truth of things and realizing that a very large portion of what is running this bureaucratic circle within the United States, like a lot of it is false, a lot of it is controlling, and it's the polar opposite of how we are naturally supposed to operate. And discovering all this, like right as COVID was occurring, I was like, it was psychologically shocking, especially with the Bitcoin. Like, so going down the rabbit hole of Bitcoin money system, how it's all connected with the food system. It was, and then the media just lying so aggressively during COVID was like so bad. And seeing how like at that time being pressured to, try to take the vaccine because you're selfish if you don't. And we're getting more and more data showing that there's an increase of excess deaths and cardiovascular issues. Turbo cancer, I think. I don't know what that is. It's something that's new. Right around the time when we started shipping out I don't even call them vaccines anymore. It's just this experimental injection. And I used to be afraid to even talk about it because people were so aggressive. And if you even, they on the media, they were essentially calling out all the anti-vaxxers, saying shit. Like Don Lemon was like, maybe we shouldn't allow them to get groceries.
Well, do you remember when the Omicron variant happened? It was around Christmas time. The White House made a statement saying,
the winter
to the unvaxxed, you're bringing death to your family.
Right.
Literally the White House.
I know. So that's where I started to really become shocked. It was, I wouldn't say it was traumatic, but it was like, this is a nightmare scenario. This does not feel right. And me and you are pretty much the same age. Like we're in our late 20s when this is happening. A time where we're like, we want to have a family, we want to be the leaders of this family and grow that family, and then have a future for ourselves. And like we're about to just spiral into this like dystopia. And so that's why I moved here. And then that's why I did the podcast, because I was like, I have to be able to express this in a mature, not professional, mature, cohesive and healthy way. And it's hard to do that in a healthy way when the institutions that are running this country are literally promoting the polar opposite, like insane things. And so you look insane because the rest of society that's plugged into this system is like, why are you telling me all these things that are like the polar opposite of what the institutions are telling us? And so, yeah, you look like, I've had family members, some or friends, like lash back saying like, what's wrong with you for certain things.
Yeah.
But then it takes some fortitude, it takes emotional resilience and, to go through those things and still hold towards the truth. And you just cater to the people that are like, oh, like they're curious and they see that you are vibrantly healthy.
Yep.
Your life is improving and they might, you can't like what I believe the human spirit, you always can kind of sense that in people unless you're just totally on drugs, you're mindless, right? But like you can sense when someone is vibrantly flourishing versus they are not. And so if you're doing something that seems to be opposed to what you're supposed to do, but you're in some manner, I think that's kind of like why Andrew Tate, like you brought up Andrew Tate, is like somewhat attracted to men because men, we live in a culture where American men specifically are becoming less and less masculine and more feminine because of the foods maybe, as well as other factors.
Yeah.
I don't agree with everything with Tate, man. I think sometimes he's outlandish and he can be like kind of an idiot, but he does, he serves a purpose in a way. Like he serves a purpose of like reinvigorating that male, powerful, like primal energy to like not have a mindless zombie society, if that makes any sense.
It does.
Hopefully I'm not talking out my ass.
No, it does.
So yeah, I that kind of stemmed that, me speaking there stemmed from the motivation of you creating this business and me motivated to create this podcast. Because what else is there? Because you can't unsee all these issues.
Yeah.
And to try to say, the business might be hard to formalize. These podcasts might be difficult to keep doing and tiresome and frightening because you're like, you're potentially going to be in the eyes of millions of people. But what is the alternative? You just kind of.
Oh, see, for me personally, I want that. Like, I'm ready for that. I've realized too why I'm saying I'm not gonna be stopped from all this. People that I haven't spoken to since grade school, high school, college, I get comments all the time.
That's awesome.
And then again, just from new people. And so America, there's 335 million plus people here. A lot of them are lost and they might see my stuff and continue on their awful habits and whatnot. There's gonna be a lot of people like that. But there's gonna be a lot of people like these other folks that I've just mentioned that will see what I'm doing, see what I'm consistently sharing on top of everything I've gone through, and they will wake up and they will start thinking about the food that they feed themselves, the food that they feed their children, the food that they will feed their future children, and they will make those changes. And I focus on those people because that's still millions of people.
Absolutely. And it's like, where do you think things are going to go for your children? So like, if not for us.
Epigenetics is a real thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's why, because I struggled with this and it's funny because I'm religious now and I grew up religious, but I remember the first thing that I started questioning that made me quote unquote go to atheism and agnostic was cancer. And I remember when I was 17 asking if there's this all-loving God, why does cancer exist? And now I wholeheartedly understand why it exists. And that's because we live in a toxic world and epigenetics is a thing to where over time it changes your genetic breakdown to where you're giving offspring to children to where certain things unlock to where I believe that they unlock, and that's why kids have cancer. And for me, my brother, my grandfather passed from colon cancer in his 40s, and my brother that's what he passed away from was colon cancer.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think you just get cancer out of the blue at all. Even if you're quote unquote healthy, there's still some toxic things, whether it be blue light, EMFs, plastics, estrogens. There's literally so much toxicity in our world paired with the epigenetics. To me, it makes sense why that happens. And that's why, again, I'm so focused on education with your food, because that is one giant step you could start making to improve all these other aspects of your life to drastically reduce your chance of ever getting cancer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. Yeah, before it was always just like, yeah, it's in your genes and that's it. You kind of just like quit, you know?
I refuse to accept that.
Yeah, I as well. And I think science is out there more, it's more commonly known now, but there was a book I bought, I read like maybe a third of it. It's called The Biology of Belief, but it breaks down from a biological microscopic level how your own thoughts and how you navigate your day to day can actually change change your body to a cellular level, which is when you really break that down, like you read that book and you see how it can literally your thoughts can change your cellular activity. That's fucking wild. And I'll be honest, man, I almost like thought about quitting this podcast. And like with this pause, I've been like, do I really want to keep doing this? Because it was just like super tiresome. And I wouldn't have thought, like, that thought was not even close to crossing my mind months and months ago. And, you know, not being physically active too, like, has been challenging. Like, movement is medicine for me, and it helps me with, you know, maintaining energy levels and whatnot. And so, yeah, I've gone, I wouldn't say a darker phase, but just like, you're not as like uplifting as you were previously when you're going and working out every day.
Yeah.
And I just saw your tagged, or not tagged, I think you have a pinned tweet that says, I refuse to be black-pilled. After all that you've gone through too, you know, it's motivated me it's been helpful when I've been in a place of like, I kind of just want to quit.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
And I've done, I mean, this is going to be episode 54, I think. So it's not like I did 1 or 2 podcast episodes, but it's also, yeah, it's been challenging. You know? So I just want to say thanks for that.
Is it cool if I read it?
Yeah.
Because the thing that,
and for the context, context for listeners, like black-pilled means doom and gloom. Like, I refuse to be in a pessimistic attitude for my life.
Yeah. So my tweet is, I'm so damn bullish on life, refuse to be black-pilled. Waking up every day is a blessing, no matter what life throws at me. The greater the storm, the brighter the rainbow. And the thing that really started my journey, because the first couple months after my brother died were a wash. I was just sulking and emotionally eating and escaping, and really just feeling sorry for myself. But I think the powerful thing, especially as a man, it's very freeing, to me at least, is no one's going to come to save you. Only you can save yourself. You can have your support, but like the saying goes, you can lead a horse to water, but it's got to drink.
Right.
And I would think about so many people in their 50s and 60s, alcoholics, gambling addicts, just whatever addiction they have, that's just their form of escapism. And that's because they never faced the trauma in their life, and that controlled their whole lives. And I refuse to let that happen, because there's so much to love about life. That's why gratitude can be awesome. Yeah, and that's just what's really carried me, is my only options are sink or swim, essentially. But in a weird way, I love that, because that's also why I now am a big believer in God, that if everything just came our way, that's a literal hell. If we just got everything we want, it's just utopia. Kind of like you're saying with your leg, and that, I wouldn't say everything with my family, I mean, it's out of my control, but there's been a lot of blessings in disguise from it all. And that's because this journey was fucking hell. But now I've always known the potential I've had in myself my whole life. But before all this stuff, I was never going to even remotely come close to that. But now I know for a fact I'm going to hit it all. I'm more confident in myself I've ever been. Why I say the greater the storm, the brighter the rainbow, it's kind of like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And that's so true. I was literally in the middle of building a business while my mother was dying, after watching my brother die, after going to the hospital and having my own near-death experience. But yet I still pushed forward, and it was absolute hell again. But now I've made it, quote unquote, on the other side. And again, life won't stop. I've got a father. Who knows how much longer he's got. Life continues to throw shit at you. And I still haven't even healed myself fully from my health. But through all of that, it's just made me a way stronger person, way more convicted in my beliefs. But then also why I said wake up every day blessed. It's just, there's just so much to love about life to where waking up is truly a blessing.
Yeah, well said, man. I can just say from personal experience, throughout this injury, I've also been going through a pretty spiritual process or a spiritual exploration. So I've never been, I would say, an atheist, but maybe agnostic. I think from like the age of being a toddler to up until like after college, I didn't really think about God or spirituality. It was just I was just being a young, naive adolescent. And when times get tough, that's when you start to go down that road of, is there something greater than us? Or if you're just bored in life and you want to find that, you're just naturally curious. But for me, it was, I think, a combination of naturally curious, and I was in a better place in my life, but there's a few things. And my journey has been a little bit more esoteric, a little bit non-traditional. It's been through a specific spiritual path that utilizes plant medicine. And their belief system around their, I would say, spiritual ceremonies is very interesting. But these ceremonies can be very in your face with resurfacing parts of what you need to heal and kind of processing those emotions. And it's my firm belief that emotions do, like very heightened emotions that you go through, whether it's heightened through like anxiety or fear or massive grief, if you do not process that, it stays with you.
For sure.
And so until you process that, you will feel more and more freedom. But if you don't process it, you're gonna, there's like this layer of just denseness within you. And that's why you see a lot of people that they numb themselves with alcohol or they numb themselves in certain ways. And
I mean, that's what, with food and obesity, I also believe the majority of severely obese folks, it's just, that's their addiction and coping mechanism is food.
With a tweak of also like, this is where like the tinfoil hat comes back in. It's like we've made these foods so addicting.
Oh, for sure.
We've made social media.
It rewires our brain chemistry.
Yeah, these phone devices are so addicting.
That's why I think it's strongly correlated with your mindset and just like the trauma. It's just, because that's why it took me, I mean, that was my coping mechanism, was smoking weed and eating a bunch of junk food. It's just like the quick dopamine to make you feel like everything's okay, but obviously it's not. It's an absolute disaster.
Yeah. And waking up early every day with that attitude, regardless of what happened the previous day, it's easier said than done. Because I've done that gratitude, prayer, affirmations every morning for years, but I was in a good stage, a peaceful stage of my life. There's been moments where, you know what, I don't do it because I'm just like in a shit mood. And it's like, you should be doing it when you're in a shit mood.
Yeah, it's never giving up. It's not, that's like with my mom's stuff. I knew she was dying and it was fucking terrible, but I had my job to do and push forward through all that. And I'm so glad I did. Because again, the more you do that, the stronger you get. And when the tough times come, they're going to suck ass, but you're more and more prepared and you're more and more confident in yourself. And you know, you've done in the past, you can do it again.
Right. From like a neurological, biological standpoint too, I mean, you are literally firing off a different network of neurons when you do difficult things. So every morning, if you go to the gym versus not going to the gym, you're going to have a substantial difference. And there's all, other health benefits aside from the neurological wiring. But just that every morning, I mean, you're changing your biology, you're changing your brain. And I can certainly say just from the past 3 years, like I am a much different person, a stronger person, to the point of when I got this injury, I'm still eating healthy. I'm not fucking off too much, but like I can't go to the gym. I can't do these things that helped with, helped me from diving into those bad habits. Because I've automated those things for so long, you're building this foundation internally to help you progress with difficult times. So it's, it's pretty amazing to experience that. And these dark moments like you face with your brother, your mother, your own health. I've also gone through stuff with my mom passing and some other stuff that happened. I've talked about on the show before. And then just other things that just kind of, continued to unroll from those previous things. Just, it takes those dark moments and then finding ways through your own willpower and maybe the help of others to get through. Once you get through those, it's pretty fucking euphoric.
Very.
So I feel like we're at like almost 2 hours here. I would love to just hear how or what you have in store for Regenaissance. So Regenaissance right now is primarily like a media podcast and a U.S. apparel company that focuses on organic,
just natural fibers right now.
Natural fibers.
Yeah.
Okay. But you just I think whipped out a Raw's Law raw milk container.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very curious to see, because you just described how you've skyrocketed here in a very short time span. You've got an MMA or previous ex MMA fighters that are interested in your brand. I'm curious to see how you are going to evolve and if you have any new things around the corner.
Yeah, I'll share what I'll be doing the rest of this year because I really believe it's going to really elevate the brand. And that's come July, I'll be on the road for a good while, just traveling around America, visiting farms and ranches for podcasting and whatnot. But again, going back to like the journalism, I want to talk to folks that that have a story that they need to share that just don't have the platform to do so.
Mm-hmm.
And like, for example, the 2 Oregon farms, I just want to go up there and, talk about that, or this huge Amos Miller case that's been happening in Pennsylvania that's ongoing. But whenever they have like another court case, for example, I want to be there and just essentially sharing the info, talking to people there. And that's the way of just adding this huge media piece, adding a lot more stories to America. Because I'm a historian, which is why I'd never had read the history of agriculture and our food. And that's why I've been so obsessed with that. And so just hearing the stories of farms and ranches is incredible. When you think about just a plot of land, say 100 acres, and certain families live there for over 100 years, and just the wealth of knowledge that they have for just that piece of land is awesome. And that's been taken away from them. So that's the biggest focal point of this year, is just adding so much media, because there's a lot I'm going to do long term that I won't be sharing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say the biggest thing is just more stories, more education. I want to do more sponsorship stuff like that. Try to get more in the athlete space, and then targeting other industries as well to bring this message mainstream, essentially. Because again, the reason why I decide on that too is you're up against massive players. The average age of the farmer is 60 plus. Most don't have an heir. Majority of the younger generations just want to be a YouTuber or something else, and not. I mean, you can get a virtual assistant job that pays better than working a back-breaking 7-day-a-week farm job.
Yeah.
So the incentives are not there
Right.
as much as they need to be. And so the time is ticking a lot. And so that's why I'm trying to fast track this as much as possible.
Yeah.
So I'm really focusing on that just through education and getting to the industries that need it the most.
Yeah. Yeah, the incentives aren't there for sure. It's a lot of hard work. But at the end of the day, this is probably one of the most important aspects of human flourishing is to have healthy food. And you can't rely on Tyson and these big meat packaging corporations to do that for you, because
No.
even though it's meat, doesn't necessarily mean the the quality is going to be good for you.
Yeah.
It's definitely not.
I mean, I had a farmer, Sweetwater Ranch and Co. In California.
Mhm.
They're outside of the Bay Area, and he does pork. And he talks about how he's had customers rave about their pork and how they've stopped eating pork for the longest time because the stuff in the grocery store they can't properly digest. And so there's so many stories like that to where they literally would eat pork from a store and make you feel like shit. You eat pastured pork and you're like, whoa, why is that?
Yeah. So it's definitely an honorable pursuit and path that you're on. And I hope it encourages more young minds to want to build something obviously not exact, but similar, because you need that kind of army of people, to a decentralized army of people promoting regenerative agriculture, because ultimately it will benefit all of humanity. Like, so appreciate it, man. I appreciate you. I look forward to how you evolve and to see where your brand and your message, like where it goes. It's going to be really exciting. And just want to thank you for your time today, man.
Thanks for having me. This was great.
Yeah, man. It just get me out of the apartment, because it's been like 3 months. So appreciate it, dude. But I think that concludes it.
Good deal.
Cool. Peace.